Hey there, Daisy here. I'm joined by James Formosa, former Canadian Forces artillery officer. He's here to tell us a little bit about his story, his recent release, and we'll go from there, I guess.
Thanks for having me on here, Chris. As you mentioned, I served in the Canadian Armed Forces. I enrolled in April of 2017, and I was released under the category 5F, unsuitable for further service. Uh, my release date was July 5th, 2022. That was just a bit over 2 weeks after the reason for my release was suspended. So I was released under the category of 5F because I refused to comply with CDS Directive 002, which was the Chief of Defense Staff's mandatory order requiring all forces members to receive a certain type of vaccination. And although I submitted a request for an accommodation, my request was denied. I still attempted to grieve the process. I am now currently sitting at the final stage of that grievance process where my case that I'd been building for the better part of the past year has reached the desk of the Chief of Defense Staff himself. And I just received notification from their office in the last couple of weeks letting me know that my case has been given to an independent civilian review board, most likely due to the case that there are, at this point, probably hundreds of grievances of similar lengths, that we're talking a few hundred pages, reaching his desk right now, and they don't have the time to go through them all, or the due diligence perhaps. And so essentially what this does mean is that, like myself, many other members that have recently been released are being, their cases are being assessed by essentially a civilian jury, and then they're supposed to give a recommendation back to the Chief of Defense Staff as to what exactly he's supposed to do about people like us, which is going to be a problem going into the future, as you can imagine, because even now, folks like myself and even others that are still in the process of being involuntarily released from the Canadian Armed Forces are gearing up to take part in a quite a large class action lawsuit, arguing quite specifically against the fact, for instance, that CDS Directive 002, we believe, and we have the evidence to demonstrate, that this order conflicts directly with both the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Canadian Human Rights Act, especially with regards to prohibited grounds of discrimination. So I've been railing against, let's say, this issue in our institution for actually the better part of over a year at this point. I was already making my concerns known as explicitly and with as much detail as I could to my chain of command as early as, over a year ago, before the Chief of Defense Staff had actually come out with Directive 002, effectively saying that vaccination was a requirement
Okay, so
to maintain in the military.
that Directive 002, what is that directive specifically?
So Directive 002 is the order signed and dated by the Chief of Defense Staff, mandating all serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces, in order to serve in the Canadian Armed Forces, they had to receive, at the time of that directive, 2 doses of a COVID-19 vaccination.
Okay.
In the case of the Canadian military as well, at least in those early on stages, we were informed that there was an exclusive contract only with Moderna. So all of the soldiers, all of the regular force serving members at the very least, were told on no uncertain terms to not only that they had to receive it, but that they would be only allowed to receive it from base hospitals, like our people in-house. They were told explicitly that they could not go to a civilian hospital or somewhere else, a clinic externally, and get some other brand.
So it had to be the Moderna. So not only did they mandate that you take this, I can be careful with my language, take this, but that you had to take specifically Moderna's version?
And specifically the batches that were being administered through things like the MIR, so the base hospitals, yes. Medical personnel that are also in the institution, in the system.
That's intriguing information, actually, because that makes me wonder. I've heard a lot of stories about it's, some of this is somewhat a test, and I've heard stories. I'm not saying this is true, but that some of these doses are placebo doses, some are a certain thing. I wonder if that's maybe the case, so they can track that. They want you to get this specific one because of
It's
whatever
it
reason.
is it should raise concerns for folks if they would, first of all, and they have been, let's say, fickle with their policy, and there's been a lot of, as you can imagine, on the fly, flexible, rolling changes as things have gone through as well. Because for my part, for instance, I would say the time frame would be last fall, somewhere around between October and November. I brought it to the attention of my chain of command, well, myself and other
Yeah.
concerned members who were going through this process. We made it known to our chain of command that, and again, it's circa October, November of last year, that at that point already, between 5 or 6 different European countries, their governments had, in their countries, banned the administering of Moderna vaccines to any citizen under the age of 30 due to the preponderance of cases of adverse effects with respect to myocarditis, which, for the folks listening, in case they don't know, if you contract myocarditis and get some of the natural side effects of that, which includes the scarring around your heart tissue, it can lead to an up to a 50% mortality rate over the next 5 to 10 years of your life. In other words, if you get a bad case of myocarditis, your chances of dying from a heart attack, heart failure, something that resembles congestive heart failure is 50-50 for the next 5 years. And better yet, it's better to think of it in terms of, again, if you have a serious case of this, that your life expectancy has, you might as well take off between 5 to 10 years from your natural lifespan. And you've, of course, severely reduced your ability to have long-standing cardiovascular health.
And
So I'm
that's a risk then that is incurred with the dose and going forward. There's a lot of people that have dropped from all kinds of things. Elite athletes. I've seen cases of Navy SEALs dropping after training, people dropping in the pool. So this is something that's affecting healthy people and their hearts, it seems.
and I brought that to the attention of my chain of command, and I didn't really get much of a definitive response, of course, at the time. And then all of our troops, and myself included, we went on our Christmas vacation, as it were. And when we were all to return to work in January of this year, they sort of surreptitiously or quietly pushed through a new update to all of us, letting folks know, like, for instance, and this again is a real case where there were some members who received their first dose of Moderna before the Christmas break, and they had an appointment, a follow-up appointment for their second dose after the Christmas break, which had to be rescheduled. And they were informed by our own base hospital that the reason why their second appointment had to be rescheduled was because, and I quote from the nurses' own mouths, they said, "We can't give you a second shot of Moderna because it's too dangerous. So we're waiting for a batch of Pfizer to come in." Of course, this was the time that myself and other concerned members that were trying to keep as on top of the information as we could brought to the attention of our chain of command the product monographs from all 4 companies. So we printed off the product monographs for AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, and Pfizer. So, and anybody, if you want to do your own research, you can look this up. Don't take my word for it. Read it yourself. This is from the horse's mouth, as it were. It's from the drug companies themselves, where in their own product monograph, kind of like the nutrition facts on the back of all of our food, they stated very explicitly that there exists no safety data with respect to mixing and matching brands in people. But of course, our chain of command just told us that that's what they were going to do because they said so.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point too. Like, because they said so. I don't know about how long were you in the forces? 5 years?
It was just a little bit over 5 years into my
Okay, so
initial 9-year contract.
yeah, so I mean, I've heard stories and seen some of the guys from V4F, or different guys I met along here, and their vaccination records. It's not like generally people in the armed forces are against vaccinations in general. Like, you guys have, I don't know about you in particular, but Canadian Forces members that deploy overseas and into various places around the world have some of the longest vaccination records I've ever seen. And they went ahead and they were okay with those vaccinations. it seems to be a very different thing happening here.
And that's
You know,
the fact that it is different should give people pause, and they should, if they're being charitable with the case that we're trying to raise here and raise awareness in people with, what they should be asking that question. Well, if we really are trying to maintain that this is a different scenario entirely than these previous examples, well, what is it that makes it so special and different? And in this case, well, first of all, again, I'm glad you bring that up, because I myself, like many others, for instance, we had to get, I'm sure when I first got in, I had to get updated with my tetanus shots and maybe some hepatitis as well, just in case I'd be going somewhere else where that would be a concern, especially with the safety of drinking water. And nevertheless, the real difference here and the concern that was raised for most of the serving members that are in my boat, let's say, is definitely the level of, let's say, from various levels, the media, politics, state-sponsored propagandistic efforts and coercive efforts that run contrary to things like, we would argue, the Hippocratic Oath or the nature of informed personal consent. And again, from the very beginning, before this was ever even made a mandate, let's say, when it was just strongly encouraged or suggested by our higher ups, even at that point, I always unequivocally, I maintained to all of my troops that this was a matter of informed personal consent, that it was a choice that they alone could make for themselves, and nobody could make that choice for them or attempt to change their minds in maybe a nefarious way, let's say. And of course, I was disciplined and admonished for daring to suggest such things. In fact, even though I was raising these concerns to my chain of command, again, before it became a top-down mandate, I was told to, in no uncertain terms, look at myself in the mirror to see whether or not I really deserve to wear the uniform, and to reread my commissioning scroll, because I dared to suggest that I can't, in good conscience, violate my conscience or do something that I know or believe to be untrue.
that seems unconscionable to me. So you brought these issues, valid concerns, through the proper channels to the chain of command, and their response was to challenge your credibility or your morality.
Essentially, and this is something that's really, it's going to be important for myself and others that went through this process to talk about in greater detail as time goes on and as more of these stories come about, to show that we really are in new philosophical groundbreaking areas, in a certain sense, where the things are happening institutionally that have never happened and are totally unprecedented.
Yes.
For instance, the fact that in order for hundreds of members to keep their careers, they're being forced to not only explain what their most personally held or sacred personal, spiritual, or religious beliefs are, but they're also supposed to, in a certain performative way, prove or demonstrate the sincerity of their beliefs. And the only way you can prove your sincerity is if you meet certain, again, very vague, ambiguous, and undefined standards that they've established for themselves. And of course, then arbitrarily, they can just decide, these people that are making the decisions higher up can decide that you haven't done a good enough job at proving how sincere you are in your belief, and they can use that even as justification for saying that your beliefs don't matter so much.
For your ideological beliefs, not your ability to lead men and women in a battlefield, which is your profession, not your ability to fire the big gun or to train it where it needs to go and to make sure that round lands on target. They care about your ideological beliefs. But in the sense that, I mean, you join, I don't want to speak for you, but I imagine you joined because of ideological beliefs to ensure and to protect freedom, I would think.
Dare I say it, I sometimes like to, if I can, toot my own horn for just a second, that I was one of those true believers, dare I say it, in the call, the vocation that is to join the profession of arms, and the reason, the more self-sacrificing reasons why people might join, in the sense that, well, while it does serve me well, it gives me all these skills and wonderful experiences that I could never have anywhere else. I wouldn't trade the things I experienced and learned for the world. Nevertheless, it should be under this somber understanding of the duties and the responsibilities that we voluntarily submit ourselves to, and we lay upon our own shoulders by taking up such a calling. And in so doing, as I've mentioned in some of my previous shows in the last couple of weeks, I have a background in studying philosophy. I got my bachelor's in philosophy at Wilfrid Laurier and my master's in philosophy at Dalhousie after that.
Okay.
And so I take thinking about thinking pretty seriously.
Yeah.
And for instance, when I was first trying to explain to the more, let's say, gung-ho people in my chain of command who really wanted to impose a certain ideological stance from the top down upon the rest of the leadership, I was cautionary to them in my long correspondence back and forth, letting them know that, first of all, I drew their attention to the first principle in the Canadian Armed Forces Code of Ethics, which is our number one ethical principle from which all of our other thoughts and decision making are supposed to follow, is respect the dignity of all persons. And for this particular issue, the problem that I was raising was the fact that, in effect, you are telling me to violate my own conscience, to either do or say or support something that my conscience tells me not to do or say or support. So by telling me to violate my own conscience, you are inherently saying first of all, I don't have a right to that conscience or to act in accordance with it, which is inherently dehumanizing, because it taking away a vital part of our human dignity is taking away the recognition and the inherent respect that ought to be given to all individuals.
Yes.
For the fact that you possess a conscience and you have this certain inalienable right to act in accordance with it.
Yeah, that's very, very good point you're making. That putting you in that position, I don't, there's a lot of legalities and things that you'd be more familiar with in the forces, but that comes along the lines of an illegal order to me. Like with, if you were in, I don't say a battlefield, or it doesn't matter where, when something betrays your conscience and you know it to not be right, who are you if you don't say something? And from what I can tell, you've gone about this in all the right. You tried to put it up the chain of command. You did your best to try to teach and inform those under your command, or those that were, I don't know how to word it exactly, but to show them what we're dealing with and some of these issues. And to me, that's, to judge you and it's even worse, like, it's hard for me to look at this, and when they're doing this, like, to veterans, or perhaps you can't be called a veteran because of the amount of time, so, but to
Hey,
do this,
I got a fancy card that says I'm a veteran, so I guess it's
yeah,
official
yeah.
now.
It's like, to me, like for everyone, just for the record, I'm not a veteran. I did my glider pilot license through Air Cadets, and that was a hugely important experience for me. And this cause has been close to me. The armed forces, the veterans. I have lots of family that served and are still serving, so it's been a cause that's been close to me for a long time. It's kind of how I connected with everyone here. But to see the government can treat people who are willing and able and trying, you're trying to do right. You're willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for us and for everyone. And to be come down on like that, it's weird. And then when you try to do what's right, to be punished and released for it, to me is beyond belief.
And keep in mind, like, that is why I knew I was playing, in a certain sense, a very long game with all of the various institutional or corrupt factors that I now perceive to be at work in this process. So I didn't want to have anything sort of that could stand as a maybe we say like a stain against my service record. So as it stands right now, the only problem or disciplinary issue that you would find in my personnel file is that I'm good to go as a troop commander at an artillery regiment, but for this one thing, I have refused to follow one particular order, and I have been willing to sacrifice my career to staking on the claim that the reason why I'm refusing is because I have reason to believe that it is a manifestly unlawful order that
Yes.
violates the Charter and the Human Rights Act. And so now that I am on the other side of it, again, it's weird to see that, again, like you said, the level of scrutiny, or the way that they're saying, well, how can we really know that these beliefs are all that important to you? Well, I was willing to give up all of the security and the peace that would have come with maintaining my career, because as I've told, and again, I said this to many of the folks in my chain of command, that there are more important things in life than money. And
Yes.
if I do not faithfully stand for what I actually believe in, I suffer a grave sin against everybody else in the world by being inauthentic and by not portraying myself as I truly am and what I really think and believe. And that's a disservice to both myself and to others if they don't know what I really think.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. I think that example you're setting is an important one. You look through in various professions. How many pastors say stood up and kept their churches open? I saw one in Calgary get hog-tied and surrounded by police and carried out down the street. How many? Same with veterans or any other profession. How many doctors? How many veterans are willing to stand? James Top did. Um, and say, like, listen, this is, I have questions, I have problems. You're not trying to force anything on anyone. We're just trying to have conversations and transparency.
The way that I tried to boil it down for people as I was going through the process was I was trying to desperately, like the voice crying out in the wilderness, so to speak, that I was desperate to get them to realize that the real deeper question behind everything we're talking about here is, what kind of society do you want to live in? And what relationship do you believe really exists between the governing and the governed? So is this a relationship of authoritarian top-down control, or is this a relationship where they exist as public servants to serve us, the public, and in that case, perhaps they may be breaking certain oaths and bonds of fellowship towards that duty?
Yeah, yeah. It's man, all of it is kind of, it's hard to wrap your head around all of this, and I'm so thankful. Like, I had seen some of your stuff when you first came out and went public, and it really got some traction. And right away I thought, man, this is exactly the timing and the person we need right now. You have been being a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. You had a huge, bright career ahead of you, doing really cool and incredible things, really hard things that were important. And when you came out, we're kind of at a place now where, people are looking for something. We don't know where to turn. We need information. And someone like you has a lot of valuable information about not only the techniques and the stuff that's being used against us, as far as, like, the communist playbook, but you have the experience and you have the moral credibility that, I'm just Chris Dacey. I know you're just James, but being an officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, that means you had to prove yourself and do some things to get there. And it means that you're a certain kind of person, I think.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate you mentioning that. And, again, it's one of the most tiring things I ever heard, of course, going through this as part of the, let's say, the ongoing demoralization tactic or the attempt to besmirch my character, was I was often labeled, of course, as a very selfish person for doing what I'm doing. However, the people that were often levying these charges against me, let's say, I don't really know what their metric or their yardstick it is that they're using to measure selfishness. Because, well, for instance, thanks to the recent changes with the armed forces and back pay and some extra little bonuses we got in the last year, I made nearly $120,000 in my career during my last full year of service, and now I make $0. And I have no intention of at least in the current political climate, of finding a new form of employment that does not address directly these issues that I perceive as essentially a fundamental threat to the ongoing peace and security of our nation. Like, the reason why I'm joining with the folks here at Veterans for Freedom and pursuing this with the same kind of dogged determination that I would have continued to pursue in my military career is because, again, this is, like, as we're talking, as we speak, this is a living testimony to how seriously I take this issue and how important I really believe it is, and the fact that I think that there is inherent worth and merit in what it is that you and I are doing.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And like I said, your timing could not have been better. People are looking for information. People are looking for, you have an ability because of what you've done and all that, where people listen to you. they want to know what you have to say. It's interesting. You touched on V4F too. So I've met a lot of the guys that were kind of the founders or whatnot of V4F early on in this thing. And I spent Canada Day at Camp Eagle. I've been, I talked to Jeff and the V4F podcast guys, and they're doing an incredibly good job getting some stuff out. But I think what they needed, I thought, sorry guys, but they needed the right face to be out there in the streets to do this social media thing. Jeff's doing an incredible job with that podcast, getting information out. But you came in at exactly the right time, feels like. And I was gonna contact them and try to hook up with you. And then we just met the other day there, and man, like sometimes that's the way things happen. But we were able to have a talk and connect. And I think what you're gonna be doing on the ground here, and what I'm doing, what V4F are doing, it's going to be important, and it's going to be a really good way forward.
Yes, there's definitely, we can see this, and we'll see this continue to manifest itself as, let's say, I think it's easy enough for us to somewhat predict that there will be greater challenges in the near future. Like the best is yet, and the worst is yet to come. But that's also going to increase the level of desire, just generally speaking, across our population and around the world. Of people have this intense desire to find information that is not being pumped through various ideological lenses, let's say through the legacy media. So the desire is certainly there. And with our, maybe you might want to say, the baked in credibility that comes with our credentials, our background, and us quite literally putting our money where our mouth is by being willing to put ourselves out there, be open to criticism and scrutiny and censorship and all the other various problems that we may invite into our personal lives by being willing to take a stand for what we truly believe. The greatest hope I have, and I know everybody else at Veterans for Freedom tends to share this idea, that we want to encourage and embolden everybody else in Canadian society and everywhere to have the integrity and the courage and the temerity to stand up for what you really believe in. The world deserves to see you and your authentic self, just as they deserve to see the real me. And unless we actually start in a very serious and deliberate way to truly stand and to openly declare and say the real things that we think and believe and feel about the sweeping societal changes that are happening, if we don't do that, then the changes will continue to happen. It will increase in terms of their frequency and their severity until we find ourselves in a position that is completely indefensible and there is no discourse way out of the problems that we'll find ourselves in. At the moment, we still have ample room in this ideological space to inform and educate our fellow citizens. Veterans and civilians alike can come together on this. Just like the video or the podcast that we just did today on the nature of common logical fallacies, because again, these are things that are easily graspable for pretty much everybody. They don't have to be dumbed down in any sense, but there is a vested interest, again, by those who would wish to oppressively control you, to make sure that you do not have the intellectual tools in your toolbox, so to speak, or these things, this rhetorical, the rhetorical tools to bring to bear in order to weave through all the Marxist soupy language they use. There's a vested interest in making sure that you don't have that readily available to yourself, so that you don't know how to defend yourself.
Yeah, and that language, the manipulation of language, the manipulation of these things is the tool of the Marxist or the communist or whatever euphemism they want to use for it now. I think it's fantastic. You're an incredibly well-spoken person with obviously a really good knowledge base and practical experience to bring to bear here. So that's a valuable asset in this. I mean, it really is. It's a war, and you've served. You learn how to fire big guns and all that. But right now, like what is so incredible and I think meaningful and symbolic is that this is the way you are fighting now. You volunteered for what you were doing. You were willing to do it, willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, and to stand on your morals now and go down this road is a very, very different road. It's one I've been on a little bit, trying doing kind of what you're looking to do now. And man, I have nothing but respect for that. Like, that is not an easy thing to do.
The
Can't
way,
be.
the way that I said it to one of the folks that was processing me through some of my final paperwork as I'm on my way out from the regiment, I guess they didn't know the exact reason why I was getting out, but you can sort of vaguely gesture at the way the world is right now, and they start to get it.
Yeah.
And I said to that member, well, I'm not leaving by my own choice, by my own volition. I wanted to make it very clear to him that this was an involuntary release because I did not see my oath as ending or my service ending because I wanted it to end. However, I did make sure, and I made a point of explicitly telling both him and a few other folks on my way out that if my time with the Canadian Armed Forces has to be cut short against my will, there can be no better reason for that to happen than for the simple fact that I am unwilling to compromise on my most sacredly held foundational beliefs and moral principles. If I have to leave for that reason, then that's probably the best reason to get out before my time.
Yeah, and yeah, it's as weird and as painful, or sorry, hard to know. I don't mean to jump into your head, but I mean that probably is the best way to leave. Like it's the circumstances are very unfortunate. They should not occur. This is not okay, any of it. But what you are doing is the same. Your oath or your principle, whatever. It's to something higher. Like the Canadian yes, to the Canadian forces and to Canadians and to, but you're standing on moral principle, what you believe, and you're sticking by that moral principle at great cost. At great cost.
I was trying to, of course, when we bring this once again way back to the beginning before they made it mandatory, I took as my sources when I'm trying to, dare I say it, enlighten the higher ups in my immediate chain of command. I was letting them know from our own internal documents, we have something that's kind of almost like an Army Bible of ethics, like duty with honor and the CAF code of ethics and things of that sort. And I drew with source material and I gave them the references and footnotes, just like I was writing an essay back in school, showing how our own doctrine even says that courage exists not only in the physical realm, but in the moral realm. It involves doing things that are not necessarily popular, but because they're just what is right. And it even there, it kind of implies that there's a recognition in our own doctrine that we realize that there's moral objectivity in this universe and that things can be right or wrong independent of how you particularly feel about them. And as I was outlining this, it was very clear to see that certain folks in the chain of command were not very pleased at all with having their own books in a certain sense thrown back at them and telling them to behave more in accordance with our own principles as stated by our own doctrine.
Yeah, yeah, man. It's so much to cover here. It's almost unimaginable for me to think about the way things are going, how serious this all is too. To have, seems weird. I mean, as a civilian, it was a little weird for me to be hanging out with all these veterans all the time. It was a bit intimidating for me and that. And then once we connect and we start talking and about the issues, and I mean, we have the same goals, we have the same idea. I think we all stand and fight in our own way. I met Danny Bulford earlier on in this, and some of the guys that have also stood. Danny Bulford, ex-star CMP. He stood up way long ago, man. I in the winter I saw him walk by and turn himself into RCMP. Like, it's crazy to even think that any of this is even really possible, and that you've had to leave your combat arms role to come and become a citizen journalist, basically. And not only that, a citizen journalist who's now being censored on the internet.
Right. So I posted a video that I actually left private and unlisted on my channel because it was actually for my my subscribers at Patreon. Please follow if you'd like, because like I said, I make this amount of dollars at the moment for sticking to my principles, as it were. But nevertheless, even though the video was unlisted, the only people that realistically could access it were folks who clearly, by every definition, these are people that want to see what they're looking at because they're going and subscribing to my Patreon to even find it in the first place. Nevertheless, because it was a video taken in public in front of Parliament, somebody else in the crowd of people there where I was standing made a claim that met the YouTube standards for what they call, in scare quotes, medical misinformation. Therefore, I have one strike on my YouTube channel. I can't post any videos on there until sometime Tuesday this upcoming week. In the meantime, I'm still, of course, working with the Veterans for Freedom channel, and I can still post things to my account on Rumble, which we'll put the link up here for people to find as well. And it just goes to show that the level of, let's say, the policing of free and open discourse, even if people are factually incorrect or they could be wrong about a great many things, whatever the case may be specifically, the real issue that we're seeing here is that, for myself, like if I'm doing this work of just, although I contributed slightly to this conversation that's in the video in question, most of it is just me filming other people around me. So I'm capturing, it is the news in a real independent muckraking sense. This is what's happening. Live news out in public, out in front of Parliament Hill. And so basically what YouTube is essentially or effectively saying with this is, I am responsible as an individual or as a reporter, as it were. I'm responsible for whatever utterance some other stranger might make in public.
Guilt by association then, in essence.
And that means that you can't even show people, again, like, how do you get to know about the truth? Never mind the truth of the individual's specific claims here for a second. But I just mean the simple fact of the truth is there are people standing at this geographic location saying proposition X, Y, or Z. Now people don't even have access unless they go to these other alternative platforms to even know that this is being said by some people.
Yeah, well, and these people are literally standing in the public square of a G7 country. Like, if you have a problem with government or issues, or you've tried other things, you're supposed to go to the public square and discuss it. Or at least that used to be the way, I thought.
Right, and they've argued extensively, I know, with all these social media systems. Now that they're ubiquitous or almost universal in our society, it's gotten to a point where lots of legal arguments have been made with respect to this idea that the physical public marketplace now ought to reasonably be seen as extending out into the digital marketplace, free marketplace of ideas. So that should encompass streaming platforms, places like YouTube, Facebook, even like Twitter and Instagram for that matter, to say that if it has become something that, again, to as close as we would say is a degree of universality in terms of this is what people use to communicate information to one another, to consume other sources of information, well, then inherently there's a public marketplace idea attached to that by that point.
Yeah, and there's a few issues there. I mean, for one, no bad idea has ever been taken out by censorship. What beats bad ideas and bad procedure, whatever, it's good ones. It takes talking, discussing, and hashing it out. And some of these ideas, like, a lot of the ideas that come from the fringe, of society or the edges of curves, often they're not great ideas. But every once in a while, there's one in there that might save us all. And it's important to allow this discourse to happen so that we can get to truth, so that we can get to what's right and figure out the best course forward. Censoring does no good.
And as I've seen through my process through the forces, there's essentially been a stifling of that process of having a real open and honest or transparent communication since the outset of their various plans and procedures, let's say, with regards to this directive.
Yeah.
So they've left us, folks in my position, if you will, in a position where we haven't even had a chance to have any kind of a real meaningful open dialogue or discussion about any of this until now, like arguably when it's too late and I'm already on the other side of my career. Yeah. Now I'm free and in the clear to say whatever I want, but the real
semi-free, like, I mean, you are censored right now. I've got a 19 or 17 day post restriction where they drop my post down lower in feeds. And I have like it was a 90-day one. I don't know how long I left. And that was for sharing 2 memes that they called, one was from 2 years ago, in fact. So someone, I don't know if a person went in and looked and reported it or whatever. So I got a strike for that on Facebook. And then I got one for an elephant in a room meme. And I got banned from posting for 7 days, this 90-day restriction where my stuff is put down in feeds. One of the reasons I use lives a lot is because I think it kind of works around that somewhat. But I mean, that's I didn't post anything that was untrue. And even if I did, should I be banned for that?
Well, it's what this is. It's an indication of the shifting of the goalposts when it comes
Yes.
to what are the new standards of discourse, morally speaking, in our culture. So
Yeah.
you are responsible collectively for the good things or the wrongdoings of everybody else in whatever polarized identity group they may lump you in with or identify you as. Similarly, you bear the guilt or the stain of the sin of whatever other individual might say about something.
Yeah.
And the real takeaway or the real conceit of all of this, of course, is just to put all of us in this new conceptual space where there is no room for even questioning things. And again, I have a lot of pithy phrases that I used to throw out when I was going through all of this, but there is some deep-seated inherent truths in them that I watched. I mean, I tell you the truth, as I was saying these same things to some of the folks in my chain of command, I saw the smoke start to come out of their ears when I told them that I truly believed that our institution is better constituted, morally speaking, if we are an institution that understands that sometimes there are questions that can't be answered and we should rather conduct ourselves in a space where we know sometimes there are questions that can't be answered rather than having answers that can't be questioned.
Oh, that's incredibly well put. Incredibly well put. Oh, jump in. You're good at this, eh, man? That
Well,
no one should
thanks for the vote of confidence.
underestimate the importance of language and communication. Those officers, that some of the Reg Force guys might knock you a little bit, but those officers, man, those 2 degrees or whatever, man, have made you a really, among other things, I'm sure, a really good communicator, and that's hugely important.
That's the one thing I can take away from all that book learning is they gave me the $5 words, and I try to keep them in my back pocket as best I can.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe then you could tell me a little bit about, so you're a member of Veterans for Freedom now.
Correct.
And I think what they're calling it, hold on here. I think what they're calling you is Ottawa correspondent, maybe, or
something to that effect. Because I mean, I did sort of come to them, a new person
yeah,
out of the woodwork, saying I'm here to serve or to continue my service as far as I see it, and I did it with a purpose, with a plan in mind, at least in the sense that I knew I needed to be close to, personally, physically close to a lot of things, especially if as we can well imagine, there's going to be new challenges and new events taking place around the nation's capital in the months and years to come. So it's better that I be within walking distance of all these wonderful institutions.
yeah,
And furthermore, by giving them just a bit of the background on, like we just did now with my story and what I went through and my background and my training and my education, they saw that I had some value to give. And we do have a vested interest in expanding what it is we're actually trying to accomplish through these efforts. We see, like, again, it's filling this niche need where our society has a deep-seated and growing desire for independent journalistic integrity with the values that we think maybe journalism in other sources used to uphold in a certain sense that they no longer now hold to. And so if we can fill that gap and provide something that is unique and it's not being serviced to the Canadian public anywhere else to this degree, well then if it can't be anybody else, it better be us.
Yeah, I think too. Veterans for Freedom are doing an incredible job with the podcast. Tom Quiggin too. Some of the intelligence stuff that they have coming out, the way that they're able to break down things. Drew's a little bit. Drew, you're a little bit boring, but I mean, he got good information. Someone like you now on the ground in Ottawa. A lot of the guys that I know from V4F anyways are out with James Top running security, managing that Canada Marches stuff. So it makes it hard. And I'm connected with all these people, but having you now, a member on the ground that can connect back and forth, it really adds another important, I think, level to this. And it's also a place where you and I could work together. Veterans for Freedom. It's a really nice connection to bring some of this stuff together.
Absolutely. And I can see now this is all tentative. I'm not making any kind of concrete claims right now in terms of exactly what's going to happen, but we've already envisioned, for instance, or for example, the fact that we very likely will will have those kind of public events where there's more direct public engagement. As you know, as a lot of people well know, there's every weekend now, still every Saturday, there's a presence of people speaking against certain governmental and global moves, let's say, outside of the front of Parliament Hill.
Yep.
Yet, as further things happen and there are greater impacts in our society, there will be larger community presences there, and not only at the Hill, but most likely at both the National War Memorial, and perhaps, who knows, maybe we'll even have some kind of a get together somewhere again in public, not taking up too much space or anything, according to PPS and bylaw. But we may speak to one another with openness and transparency outside of NDHQ, or the National Defense Headquarters in Ottawa, because, dare I say it, maybe the Chief of Defense Staff himself might look out from his window and see all of us peasant folk down in the streets, and think twice before he tells us again to eat cake.
Well, man, if you would have seen, I guess it's old NDHQ headquarters there now. They've moved out to where Nortel used to be in Ottawa. But man, when James Top came marching through down the Rideau Canal, I walked like 5 kilometers backwards filming, and I never saw the end of the line. They were 5 wide, not 2 or 3, and they came all right down underneath the shadow of that NDHQ headquarters. And that's where he stopped and kind of went and did one heck of a talk, man, talking about, being respectful, about how important, about dignity, about, it was one heck of a speech. And then to walk up around that corner to that sacred ground, I was walking backwards and filming, but I saw his eyes when they hit the memorial. And I was on the corner of the tomb when he touched it. And man, it almost knocked me to my knees. How anyone could not, these powers that be, could not look out their windows and see that this is something more, and something that needs to be addressed, and something that needs to be talked about, is beyond me.
And thankfully, I always am drawn back, even in these cases, that while there is a certain healthy amount of cynicism, and Jeff can certainly speak to that as well, but I'm always eternally brought back again to a certain sense of optimism when I see things like what you just mentioned. And I know that people have this deep-seated desire and their craving for righteousness, for true righteousness. And in a real meaningful, deeply embedded sense, we know what right looks like, but there's that growing thirst, or this desire for people to see in their own lives examples of people showing us what right looks like. And James Top, amongst others, is trying to be that example. And I'm hoping through my conduct and through what value I can add to this institution and this organization, I can, in my own small way, as well, show people how to forthrightly and with confidence stand up for what you believe in.
Yeah, well, that's incredible too. And as you say, that's something that's been meaningful. I wear this shirt now, and that's something I feel like I earned. And I conduct myself differently than I did earlier on when I was learning through this process. Through engaging with people of high moral standard and principle, like yourself, and like some of the V4F members, and all kinds of other people as well that I met along this way. When you see somebody doing something that's right, you feel it. When someone is standing up against something, it's that instinct to mimic, sort of, and you feel it. And it's someone that you say, I feel this, I can take this, and I can follow this.
Right, and it stands in a sort of a direct opposition, even in a spiritual sense, to the way that people, you might say, are being forced or coerced to parrot, let's say, talking points from other sources that are not their own. There's a lot of people, unfortunately, in our own society and elsewhere. It's a problem throughout a lot of places in the world right now. There's a lot of people, in a certain sense, they are sleepwalking through their lives, and the lion's share of the things that they say or profess to believe are not thoughts or beliefs of their own, and they don't even realize that they are not saying thoughts or beliefs that, in a sense, belong to them.
Yeah, it's like the slave to some other philosopher. You don't even know.
Right, and with the stuff that we're doing here, I have a real deep-seated sense that grip, or that hold, that they've even now tenuously tried to have over our society and societies elsewhere, it's already in the process of failing. That's why there's such a growing need and concern for us to go in a different direction and to, in a certain sense, form our own parallel organizations that stand in opposition to the what we might say are irredeemably infected and corrupt institutions that we once trusted.
Yeah, yeah, well put. And it's this is the way that we win. It's you can't ever. We have to play the game in the sense that they use language, use the stuff. We need to address this stuff. We need to speak about it. But what we need to do is stand true to our moral beliefs, ultimately.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's so incredible. James, it was awesome. It was a pleasure to run into you. It's like so many things in this, you came, I feel like, at the right time. We ended up downtown, like you said. There's still people, all kinds of people that are down at the hill every day. And these are people that have lost stuff, that are suffering. They're from all kinds of different places. Some from Ottawa, some from Danny from New Brunswick, and these people too are all adapting and changing on the fly and trying to learn. But that experience that we had on the weekend and walking, it was more of not a silent march, as in we didn't speak, but people had signs. We walked and we were able to engage people, even the people that were coming at us with maybe hate or anger. You gave them right back love, and that's what everyone was kind of doing. We were engaging, and I felt like that was a nice walk, and that would be something that would be really good to do going forward.
Right. Literally, we were kind of almost in a certain sense there showing ourselves what right looks like as well too, and it was born through the fruits of our labor. We saw, look, there were people that were maybe more encouraged to actually talk to us or felt more comfortable coming up and saying, well, hey, what is all this even about? And even to us, we might be tired or frustrated with the idea that there are still some people that don't really know what it is that we're on about or what we're talking about. Nevertheless, approach them with the principle of empathy and charity. And if they are being that open-mindedly curious to learn or hear about what you have to say, meet them where they're at and attend to their questions and concerns at whatever level they approach you.
Exactly. Approach it with compassion, with empathy, with love. And that statement, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's not the way I want to look at it. I want my enemy to find love. Like if they had love in their heart and they were healed and they found light, then chances are we wouldn't be enemies. We could talk. We could move forward productively and together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think maybe we'll call it there, James. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'd love to work with you going forward. See you in Ottawa, and this connection too between us doing our thing and VPRF and everything going on. I'm really excited about things going forward.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks so much for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to that as well.
Okay. I'll talk to you again soon, James. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take care.